Up next in the broadcast, 6 surviving students of April's Sewol-ho ferry disaster go to court and testify in the trial against the ferry's crew. And the testimonies point to the crew and Coast Guards giving up on the lives inside. Analysts attribute record-breaking highs of the KOSPI to newly appointed Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan's announcements for aggressive and expansionary economic policies. And a 24-hour humanitarian truce proposed by Hamas early Sunday to mark the end of the Islamic Ramadan holiday was over by the afternoon, with both sides exchanging fire. Primetime News begins now. Happy Monday, everyone. Live from Seoul, this is Primetime News. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Tae-ri. Hope your week is off to a great start. Korea's finance minister says that aggressive fiscal and monetary policy will be critical through at least next year to prop up Korea's ailing economy.
And as part of his vision, he emphasized the importance of breathing life into the nation's real estate market. Our Hwang Ji-ae has the details.
Korea's new Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan is strongly pushing ahead with its goal to boost the nation's flagging economy. During a television debate with journalists on Monday, Choi said the government will seek aggressive economic policies for as long as they're needed.
Whether it's fiscal or monetary, we need an expansionary policy for the time being. I'm not just talking about the second half of this year. The policies should continue at least until through next year and could continue on beyond that, if necessary.
Choi added that the government and the nation's central bank share the same view over the current economic situation. He said that both parties have agreed on running an expansionary policy, further raising expectations of a rate cut next month.
The Korean economy is suffering from poor conditions, so the Bank of Korea will countermeasure such risks with its monetary policy.
Choi said, however, that he's skeptical about lowering the key rate too much, like in the United States or Japan, where interest rates remain near zero as their economic situations are different. The finance minister also described the current real estate market as being in a cold period and reiterated the importance of normalizing the housing market. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
And the Choi Kyung-hwan effect and hopes over his stimulus package have sent the country's benchmark KOSPI index soaring, hitting yet another fresh high for the year. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Monday was another record-breaking day for the nation's benchmark index. After surpassing the 2,050 mark at one point in midday trading, the KOSPI settled in at 2,048 points, picking up its biggest gains in nearly 9 months. Kim Young-yeol, an analyst at Seoul-based Kyobo Securities Company, says the impact of economic plans laid out by the country's new finance minister have played an important part in the record-breaking gain.
The local stock market is reflecting on Choi's economic plan, which shows the government's willingness to breathe life into the Korean economy. The main difference between the new economic team and the previous one, led by Hyun Oh-seok, is that other government departments, such as the Ministry of Strategy and Finance and the Bank of Korea, are on the same page with Choi on what kinds of policies should be made in order to diagnose the Korean economy.
Last Thursday, the nation's new economic team, led by Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan, unveiled a $40 billion stimulus plan to spur growth by inducing spending and promoting corporate activity. Although the new finance minister has left the issue of setting the country's interest rate to the Bank of Korea, Choi said he expects the monetary authority will make decisions to counter the economic downturn. Meanwhile, Kang Yeon-chul, an analyst at Seoul-based Uri Investment and Security, says the country's rising exports played a big part in the KOSPI surge.
Exports this year have reached all-time highs, and company performance has also improved compared to last year. Exports to the U.S. and Europe steadily rose, and exports to China are expected to rise during the July and August period this year.
Korea logged a trade surplus for the 29th straight month in June, as exports amounted to $47.8 billion last month, up 2.5% from a year earlier. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
And this next report coming from Korea's by-elections campaign trail. The ruling party is working hard to shake off the April ferry disaster by highlighting economic stimulus and growth measures, while the opposition parties found a new angle in the ferry disaster to criticize the government. Ji Myung-gil has more.
The July 30th polls carry extra weight because 15 parliamentary seats are up for grabs, the largest total ever for a by-election. The stakes are perhaps greatest in this Seoul and Suwon constituencies, which are considered strategically important as barometers of public sentiment. Candidates of the ruling Saenuri Party have made economic recovery their main platform. They've been touting their party's connection to President Park Geun-hye and promising reforms.
There are two choices in this election. Elect our candidates who will bring about economic development for their electoral regions, or their candidates who are mired in collusive practices and old politics.
The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has also gone on the offensive, deeming the by-election a chance to prompt change.
We must provide a warning to the ruling Saenuri Party and the presidential office so that the government brings about changes.
The main opposition party has been hammering on the government's failure to arrest Yu Byung-on, the de facto owner of the Sewol-ho ferry, which sunk in April, killing 304 people. To make them more competitive in races against their conservative rivals, the opposition recently unified campaigns in specific constituencies behind one candidate. The by-election comes less than 2 months after local elections in June, which neither the ruling nor the main opposition party claimed victory. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
An arrest warrant has been issued for Yoo Dae-gyun, the eldest son of Yu Byung-on, whose family's corrupt business is suspected to have led to the April ferry disaster. The son was detained last Friday along with 34-year-old Park Soo-kyung, who allegedly helped him evade capture. Both had been on the police's wanted list since the Sewol sinking that took the lives of more than 300 people. Mr. Yu will be questioned regarding his alleged embezzlement of about $9.6 million from the ferry's operator and its affiliates. And staying with the disaster, 6 surviving students were in court today giving testimony in a trial against the ferry's crew members. The students said many more would have survived that morning if the crew and the Coast Guard had taken proper measures. Our Yu Lian tells us more.
A ferry with about 300 passengers, most of them students, is sinking fast. But instead of staging full-out rescue efforts, their crew members are nowhere to be seen, and the Coast Guard is watching from afar. This was the testimony given by 6 survivors of April's Sewol-ho ferry disaster, who are students of Danwon High School. Speaking in a court hearing Monday afternoon, the 6 gave a chronological account of the event from the time of the accident. One said that about 30 students were lined up for the emergency exit, but when the rescue team didn't arrive, each student began jumping into the water. As soon as she did, the student says in a shaky voice that the wave suddenly crashed up against the emergency exit where 10 of her friends had been waiting. They were unable to escape. Another surviving student also said that the Sewol-ho crew were nowhere to be seen for the entirety of her escape. She testified that the Coast Guard was within an arm's reach of the emergency exit, but only lifted out the people who fell into the water. She said she told them a lot more of her friends were just inside the emergency exit, but the Coast Guard only watched as the ship continued to list. Most students told judges that there were repeated announcements instructing passengers to stay where they were. If they had received instructions to escape, the 6 students said many more could have survived. The students ended their testimonies by asking the panel of judges to punish the crewmen to the strictest letter of the law. Sewol-ho ferry captain Lee Jun-seok and 3 of his fellow crew are currently on trial for charges of homicide by willful negligence. None were present at Monday's court hearing. Yu Lian, Arirang News.
We're at the height of the summer vacation season here in Korea, a time when millions of Koreans take a few days off to recharge. President Park Geun-hye is also taking a vacation this week, although her getaway spot will not be anywhere else but the presidential office of Cheongwadae. Officials say she will have a very quiet vacation, considering the country is still mourning the victims of April's ferry disaster. The president is expected to continue working on ways to revitalize the economy and decide on who to nominate for the vacant culture minister post.
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Chae-ri from the heart of Seoul.
News begins now.
Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
With a slow local property market in China, Chinese companies flush with cash are going overseas company shopping. And Korea is no exception when it comes to China's aggressive M&A moves. Song Ji-sun reports.
Chinese companies are busy buying up overseas companies with their huge cash reserves. According to Bloomberg on Monday, Chinese firms spent some $44 billion on global merger and acquisition deals this year, up nearly 40% from a year earlier. Chinese investors have traditionally invested in the domestic real estate market, but with profits eroding amid slowing growth, many are turning to foreign firms for higher gains. And Korea, a close neighbor and home to many advanced IT technologies, is one of the major go-to places for China's investors. Chinese corporate mergers and acquisitions of Korean firms have jumped 27-fold to $661 million this year compared to the same period last year. So what's behind the spike? Well, it's mainly because Asia's biggest internet company, China's Tencent, spent some $500 million buying a 28% share in Korea's CJ Games as it looks to bolster its lineup of online and mobile entertainment. China's IT giants like Tencent, along with Alibaba and Baidu, are fiercely investing in Korean game developers to acquire the skills to invent hit mobile games. On the other hand, Korean firms' investment in Chinese firms through M&A stands at a mere $20 million this year, 1/5 of the volume recorded last year. This is raising concerns Korean firms may lose their own shares while the Chinese aggressively acquire Korean stakes. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
A recent survey shows many Korean startups are mom-and-pop stores, meaning they might not necessarily be creating new jobs or promoting innovation. According to Global Entrepreneurship Monitor 2013, these small-time local businesses accounted for 37% of all startups in Korea last year. That's the highest percentage among the 26 countries surveyed. The data comes in stark contrast to countries like Norway and Switzerland, where the proportion is less than 8%. Korea's financial authorities have announced ways to make things easier for foreigners in Korea to shop online. They're lifting the 300,000 won or $290 limit in online authentication system and allowing multiple payment technologies. The authentication program was designed to enhance cybersecurity but did cause a major inconvenience by shoppers. The changes could go into effect as soon as early next month.
Now on to the latest global demographics data when it comes to the smartphone population. The number of smartphone users around the world is expected to reach 2.5 billion by the end of next year. Market researcher Strategy Analysts says about 35% of the global population of approximately 7.2 billion will use smartphones next year. That means more than 3 in every 10 people will be smartphone users. On the cultural front, a special photo exhibition about Korea's easternmost island of Dokdo opened on this Monday. It's the work of celebrated photographer Kim Jung-man, who's made the island his subject every season over the last 2 years. Our Park Ji-won reports.
From its breathtaking sunrises and the east sea that surrounds it, to flocks of seagulls and the moon hovering above the horizon, This photo exhibition shows the many faces of Dokdo that may be foreign to those who haven't had the pleasure of visiting. Korea's celebrated photographer Kim Jung-man visited Korea's easternmost territory several times over the course of 2 years to capture the beauty of the island day and night at every season.
It is a great honor for a Korean photographer to be able to shoot the very place that represents the Korean spirit. This beautiful and sometimes lonely place has inherited various artistic meanings as well, with some literary and historical connotations.
Kim shot more than 20,000 photos, but settled on 55 works that depict the mysterious and humble island. All the photos will be donated to the Northeast Asian History Foundation, which first came up with the idea of the Dokdo exhibition.
People can now freely visit Dokdo, but they usually don't stay long enough to appreciate the diversity of the island. We'd like to show audiences various beautiful images of the islets.
The foundation hopes the exhibition helps to counter Japan's false claims to the island, an island that is not only Korean land, but also part of the Korean spirit. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Three weeks of violence in Gaza, and still the crisis is showing no real signs of letting up, with both Hamas and Israel firing attacks on each other despite ceasefire proclamations.
For more, Kim Hyun-bin is standing by at the news center. Hyun-bin, is there any hope of a possible truce?
Well, over 1,000 people, mostly civilians, have been killed since this conflict began. And in efforts to bring a halt to the bloodshed, the UN Security Council has wrapped up an emergency meeting over the growing number of casualties and called on all parties to lay down their weapons. Our Connie Lee reports.
The UN Security Council has called for an immediate and unconditional humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza to allow for the delivery of urgently needed assistance. The statement comes after an emergency meeting early Monday as military operations resumed in the Gaza Strip despite calls for a truce. Israeli tanks and soldiers are still positioned along the Israeli-Gaza border as talks over a temporary ceasefire broke down. The 24-hour humanitarian truce proposed by Hamas early Sunday to mark the end of the Islamic Ramadan holiday was over by the afternoon, with both sides exchanging fire. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu questioned the validity of the Hamas truce and said his country was not going to let a terrorist organization decide when it's convenient to fire at our cities, at our people, and when it's not. International pressure is on for both parties to resolve the conflict. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon spent last week in the Middle East seeking a peaceful end to the violence. U.S. President Barack Obama also spoke with Netanyahu by phone, calling for an immediate ceasefire. Since the conflict flared up on July 8th, more than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed, mostly civilians, including many women and children. It's a scene of massive destruction, as piles of rubble and debris are seen all around the Gaza Strip, as the conflict shows no sign of letting up. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And it's been a week and a half since Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 was shot out of the sky, but officials are still trying to gain full access to the crash site in eastern Ukraine. Their progress has been hindered by the pro-Russian rebels blamed for the incident. As Shin Se-min reports, while the international community is weighing its options, a military mission appears to be off the table.
Achieving military superiority through an international mission in this area is, according to our conclusion, not realistic, not even if we have a massive military buildup.
Prime Minister Mark Rutte says the idea of sending international troops to the crash site in rebel-controlled Ukraine is not just unrealistic, but also too risky. While he said all options were on the table, military intervention is apparently not one of them, over fears that the development would only stand to broaden the conflict.
The area is under control of the separatists, consisting of many heavy armed soldiers at a short distance from the Russian border.
They're the same separatists who stand accused of shooting down Flight 17 with nearly 300 people on board. While an earlier deal between Malaysian authorities and the rebels laid the groundwork for an investigation into the disaster, obstructions remain. A team of unarmed Dutch and Australian officers were forced to drop plans to visit the crash site on Sunday due to heavy shelling in the area. More than 200 bodies of the 298 victims in the crash have been recovered. Officials believe the others remain in the plane's wreckage. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The Liberian government closed most of the West African nation's border and introduced stringent health measures to halt the spread of the deadly Ebola virus. The new measure was announced on Sunday as Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone struggled to contain the worst outbreak yet. All borders of Liberia have been closed off, with the exception of major entry points, where prevention and testing centers have been established. Under the measure, public gatherings such as demonstrations, marches, and promotional advertisements will also be restricted. Ebola can kill up to 90% of those infected, although the fatality rate of the current outbreak is around 60%. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to sports. Well, let's jump right into baseball. South Korea has completed assembling their team for the Asian Games, with manager Ryu Jung-il of the Samsung Lions unveiling the 24-man roster on Monday. Next in first baseman Park Byung-ho, who has a league-high 31 home runs, along with contact hitters Lotte's Son Ha-seop and NC's Na Sung-bum, headline the squad. Those picks were a lock, but some of the infield, not as much. Ryu chose Tusan second baseman Oh Jae-won over the KBO's hits and runs leader, next in Seo Gun-chang, for his versatility. Meanwhile, he also left out his regular Samsung third baseman Park Seok-min, despite Park putting up career numbers this year. And speaking of baseball, two makeup games on Monday in the KBO. First, the Nexen and SK game. Right now, Nexen leads SK 10-8 in the ninth inning. But let's get to the matchup between the Lotte Giants and LG Twins in Seoul. Now we go to the top of the first. Lotte's Park Jong-yun hits the sac fly for the first run. Then more runs in the third inning. Kim Moon-ho hits the run-scoring double. Then Ha Jun-ho, he singles to bring him home. It's 3-0 Giants. But seventh inning, Park Yong-taek of LG finally scores some runners home. Chung Hee-yoon, he caps it off with the homer. LG gets the lead and they close out to complete the comeback 5-3. And moving on, the new technical director of South Korea's football, Lee Yong-soo, is looking for a new manager but won't rush the call. Addressing the press at KFA headquarters on Monday, the 54-year-old said he'll take his time with the decision, which may not come by September's friendly matches. For now, he and his newly formed team will review 15 Korean and 15 international candidates in their first committee meeting on Wednesday. And for golf, the LPGA's inaugural International Crown Tournament wrapped up at Caves Valley, and Spain was crowned its champion. They were on the ropes after day 2, but earned 2 wins on the final day of 4-ball on day 3, and a clean sweep for 4 wins in singles play on Sunday to win it all with 15 points. Meanwhile, South Korea, which won the playoff to compete in the final day 4, nabbed just 1 of 4 singles matches to end with 10 points, good for 3rd place. And that wraps it up for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later with more from the world of sports.
Hope your week is off to a good start, everyone. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather update. Well, at the moment, the southern regions, including Jeju, are under the influence of a monsoonal front, which is why they are receiving rain. Through tomorrow, Jeollanam-do province could get up to 40 millimeters of precipitation, while Jeollabuk-do and Gyeongsang-nam-do are looking at about 5 to 20, so an umbrella will come in handy if you are in those regions. Now, another round of showers is set for Wednesday, while the rest of the week looks to be nice and sunny. Hope you were able to grab a bowl of chicken ginseng soup or samgyetang to better deal with the heat, as today is Chungbok here in Korea, which indicates the hottest day of the summer, and it was a scorcher as daytime highs here in the capital soared to 32 degrees. Sweltering conditions will continue through tomorrow, so stay cool. On to Tuesday's readings. Seoul jumps to 33, while Daegu and Gwangju make it to 32. As for other places, Daejeon and Jeju reached the low 30s, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang hit 26. That's all for now, but I'll be back with more updates after midnight. See you then.
That's Primetime News for this Monday. I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Kang Chae-ri. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.